Welcome. I'm J. Michael Silver, and this is Foundational Steps, the show where I talk with people about the choices they've made and how they got where they are in life now. In this episode, I'm talking with Caroline Lesley. She's an actor, writer, mother, wife, entrepreneur, and so much more. She does it all and at a very high level. We had a great time catching up and talking about all the things in her life. Links to Caroline and timestamps for what we talked about are in the show notes. Please support the show by leaving a comment or a review. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Check out our affiliate links in the show notes. There might be something of value. Enjoy our conversation. It's good to see you again. It's funny how we picked up before we started recording. We picked up, like it was yesterday that we saw each other in workshop or whatever.
Yeah, but it's been like 5 years.
No, it's not been 5 years.
I think it had. I didn't think so. And then I was talking to my kids yesterday or one of these days. They're all blurring into one these days.
Yeah,
but
true.
We did the math, and I think it's been like 5 years since we've been back here in Canada.
Wow. That's incredible. I had no idea that I mean, I guess the pandemic, that's 2+ years.
That's a vacuum.
Yeah, that's a vacuum. So yeah, I guess then it's a couple of years before that. Well, how old are your girls now?
11 and 9.
Oh, wow. They're
Yeah.
Okay. Because they were tiny.
They were like little.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
Like they're talking about, boys they think are cute now. Like we're there.
Oh, wow. Well, that's got to be exciting.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, they don't want my husband to know. So it's always just like when I put it into bed at night, I'll just casually say, is there anybody you find interesting? I don't want to say cute or that's my dog. And I don't want to say, because I don't know, it could be a boy or a girl or
Sure.
Who knows?
Yeah.
So they're starting to let me know that they both find a couple of boys cute.
Wow, that's wild. And why not? Why don't they want to let their dad know, your husband know?
I don't know. I think that I don't even think they're ready to tell me, especially the younger one. She's the one that actually seems to be more interested.
Oh,
She's
wow.
trouble. She's 9 and she for sure has a crush. And I think she told my older daughter, and then it sort of trickled out. She sort of divulged something to me. So now they're like opening the floodgates more. But I think it was just the start. It's not like I'm going to be mad. Oh, I know what she said. She thought that I was going to be like, ooh. Sometimes I can be like a nerd. I think I'm a fun mom, but.
Well, yeah, but you're still the mom and you're still
right.
the authority figure. And yeah, I mean, that's interesting. A lot of, since I've been doing this, most of the conversations that, I focus on having are about choices, people make and how they end up where they end up. But it's so interesting because it's hard to track, preteen stuff because our brain isn't fully developed. And, what we think is, if we remember it, it's kind of colored by whatever else is going on. And I think a much greater way than later in life, when we understand, I think the coloration a little bit better.
Well, I was talking about this the other day and I couldn't remember how old it is, but it's 18 or above, if I'm right, when your brain is fully developed.
24, 25, I think is, and I'm not a scientist, obviously, so I'm not 100%, but what I remember, because I used to work with at-risk youth, and the big thing was your brain isn't done developing the part of right and wrong until you're like 24, 25 years old.
Oh, it's 24, 25. That's even crazier.
Yeah. So some girls and boys are a little bit earlier, some are a little bit later. But right around the 24, 25 is when your brain finishes developing the part of your brain that really is in charge of right and wrong. So
right and wrong and decision making.
Yeah, well, which is decision making, really. Yeah. I mean, it's a good decision, bad decision. You might say, well, at 18, you might say, well, I know I'm not supposed to do this and I know I'm going to get in trouble, but can't I get away with it? Or maybe. So that part of your brain isn't done developing until like 24, 25 years old.
we were talking about it around the context of these young people that are transgender and going through changes. And one of them is my sister's really good friend. And I know several people that their kids are going through it and they're teenagers. And I don't know if it's right or wrong, but I just was wondering and considering what you're saying about that part of the brain. I would hate for them to later in life be like, oh, I didn't want to do this or whatever it is.
It's happening. I mean, there are a lot of people that transition early and then go, what the hell did I do to myself?
Or
But,
not, but
or not. I mean, but it depends. I mean, I, it's funny. And I don't know if you would know this. And I don't think most people know this, because why would it come up? But for 2 years, I worked at the oldest trans bar in Los Angeles back in the early aughts, like from
I didn't know that.
2000 to 2002. I worked at a bar that no longer exists. It was called the Queen Mary. It was in Studio City here in LA. And I think it was established as a drag bar in the 40s, in the late 40s, and after World War II. And they did lip syncing. They did the whole drag show, like, Tu Wong Fu, that whole thing. And a lot of birthdays, a lot of, but it was fascinating. I learned more about human sexuality working there than I ever knew existed, or had even the inkling, in my early 20s, it existed.
Yeah.
But, being around, before trans was cool, before it was accepted, being around that world, in the early 2000s, definitely gave me a different understanding of my sexuality and my kind of gender, or how I saw my gender. And I just kind of, it was what it was at the time. Now, with what's going on, I think, God, would I have been confused if I was a teenager, like if I was 13, 14, 15, because I used to, I don't know. I guess we're going there. So, we can, we can pivot. But I honestly don't know. A friend of mine said, "Oh, I'm a lesbian," joking around. A guy, because he was attracted to women, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm a lesbian." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm a lesbian. That makes total sense. I am." Because in every way, I felt like a woman. I felt like the stereotypical woman back in the 90s, of emotional and attachment, all of the stereotypes for female back then. I felt. I also like sports. I also liked being active, but I was attracted to women. So to me, it was like, being a tomboy or being a lesbian made perfect sense, except I had a penis. And back then, I didn't know there was such thing as trans. I didn't know people transitioned. I had no clue until I was, I think, 21. And the first time I met a trans person, and I met a trans woman. It was the husband turning wife of a woman that I was training with as a dancer. And my first thought was like, that's an option? Like, no one told me this.
Right. Well, here in Toronto, I had gay friends in high school and, whatever, but there's
Were they out in high school though?
Yes.
Oh, interesting. None of my gay friends were out in high school.
Yeah, no, they were. And one of them, it was a figure skater, and he also went to an arts high school. So he was in the drama program. And the other one was I was in a regular high school, and but he was fully out. And like, if you look back, it actually was kind of crazy, because to your point, a lot of people were really afraid to admit that.
Oh yeah.
But there's a big gay community here on Church Street, and they do the Pride Parade. And so it was probably like in my early 20s, but yeah, there was all the drag queens and transgender, and it was just a huge celebration. But you raised a good point about you feeling different or whatever because of the emotional connect, right? So I think back then, more than now, men were really afraid to
Oh yeah.
show their emotions and cry. I grew up with my dad is super, like, he's an emotional dude and he will show his emotions. So I always thought that was normal. And then
Uh,
I navigated the landscape and saw all these guys, and I'm like, what's with them? Why won't they show me who they are? Like, it was a strange time.
so that's interesting. So is your husband emotional with you, like from the beginning?
Not really. It was kind of, in the beginning, it was more of a mystery, and I guess I had to get to know the real him. But he did
Mhm.
sort of have that man sort of thing, man thing. I don't know what
Yeah,
you want to
right.
call it, but
The
how we grew
stereotypical
up
of yesterday.
of yesteryear.
Yesteryear,
But
yeah.
yeah, he definitely is, and as we age, he gets more and more tapped into that emotional side.
That's good.
Yeah, it's great. And watching movies, I'll look over him and I feel like I'm like, oh, he's really deep into this. Okay. I'm like, that's great. Yeah, but I
That's
think it's
awesome.
important, right? We all
Yeah.
need to show it more. And it's yesterday here in Toronto, in Ontario, it was Bell Let's Talk Day. So Bell Media is one of our big telecom companies, and
Okay.
they do a day called Bell Let's Talk Day, and it's really to get people talking about their mental health and anything. They'll just tell anecdotal stories about what they've lived with, depression, anxiety, and
Mhm.
they donate 5 cents to mental health for every person that did a post. And it's just like a great movement, because all of these things we work on, our physical health, for so long it was this taboo. You can't say you have a problem with your brain. What do you
Yeah.
mean? It's a muscle, it's part of our body.
Everything has changed so drastically, so fast with regards to, normal behavior, whatever the word normal means.
Right.
And I think it's, you know, you know, I, I'm young in the grand scheme of things, I'm in my mid 40s now, and I I'm very aware of yesteryear's mentalities, and I'm young enough, and because of being an artist and living in LA, I'm very aware of the newer, younger generations kind of look on things,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a lot to process. Like, for me, my biggest thing looking around the world is like, can we just give each other a break just a little bit,
I
maybe a
agree.
little bit of space to like catch our breath, because
Yeah.
most people are going, huh?
Yeah.
With every,
I Well, what's happened, in my opinion, is the pendulum was over here and we needed to get over here, but it's gone. It's like
yeah,
so far over here that, like, my kids are teaching me all about this stuff and they're growing up with it. But, you know, we're not allowed to say, I mean, now it's all labels. What? I
yeah,
thought we weren't allowed to label people. I thought we wanted
yeah.
to just be. So I'm confused. And maybe I'm just old, but I'm just trying to get it right.
Well, my sister is 3.5 years older than me, and I didn't remember this specific, but there was a specific movement of I don't see color. I see the person
Yes.
you are.
Mhm.
And I forgot about that whole thing because, and I think it's because being an actor and looking at everything from character and looking at from individuality and looking of like background, backstory. Well, my backstory is, the prejudice I experienced was not the same prejudice that someone with darker skin experienced.
Yeah.
So like for me, I think I just automatically took those factors in, where my sister very much was like, no, we're not supposed to see color. We're supposed to see the individual. And so backstory and personal experience didn't factor as much for her.
Hmm.
Where I don't know, I'm guessing you were similar to me, where we understand the norm, but we also want to go beyond that. What's your personal experience? Does
Yeah,
that,
100%. I I mean, I always saw people, but I never judged it, if that makes
yeah,
sense. It was just, who you are. And I'm not saying like I'm so altruistic, but I
none of us
wish
are.
more
We do our
people
best.
could just embrace things. And it's just so layered, and the history, and I mean, we can't even begin to unlearn everything that we don't even know we learned,
Yeah,
right? So it's just very complicated.
it is. It is.
And
Well, so, okay. So that's actually a good, kind of a good segue. We can't unlearn, or we can't know what we don't know. And learning what we learn in the beginning, it's like you can't unlearn that. It's part of us. It's part of our history. So we have
right.
to move forward. And so, I'm curious, just and also kind of sticking with the idea of labels and so forth. When you were younger and you were making the choices that got you here, how much did labels, were you like, I'm an actress, I'm an artist, how much of those labels were important at that point in time? Because you've always, to me, been a very get her done mentality. Like, you're on the forefront of stuff. You were good on Instagram at the beginning, you're on the NFTs, like you're like, you don't hesitate in getting into things. So I'm wondering, like, with your parents, with you, did you find like, oh, I'm an artist, that's a thing, that matters, those labels, or was it an easy thing because it didn't
Mm.
matter, you were just going towards whatever was interesting to you?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. And thank you for saying that, because I always, I guess, a little hard on myself, thinking, oh, I'm not getting enough done. I'm not doing this or not. But to your
You're a
point,
super mom. Like, all the
thank you.
arts and crafts I've seen, on top of, all the different things you juggle. I mean, it is amazing.
Thank you. When I step back, when I'm having like a tough day, I do try to make a list and go, oh wait, I wear this hat, hit this hat. Okay, I'm doing a lot. But no, to go back to like when I was a kid, I think I was like, I was actually a really shy kid.
Hmm.
So the labels I started to receive in high school was more, they were hurtful because I was shy. So people thought I was a snob, but I wasn't being snobby. I just was shy.
Yeah.
So I think that sometimes I wouldn't be so outgoing or say things to people and they would be like, oh, she was brushing me off. But on the flip side of that, I spent a lot of time like in my room writing
Hmm.
and just doing monologues by myself, or with the door closed, like by myself, just doing this creative stuff.
So wait, were
um
you doing monologues before you even performed, or thought of yourself
yes,
as an actor?
yeah.
Huh.
So it started in grade 8. I took an interest in wanting to act, and I started doing an after school acting class called Lifetime Learning. And we put on a show, and I remember it was the song Imagine was the backstage
John
song.
Lennon, yeah.
John Lennon, Imagine. So every time I hear that song, I'm going to be 44 in July. This was when I was 13. I still get nervous. I get butterflies, that recall. Music's a big one, right?
Oh
Scent,
yeah.
music.
Yep.
So yeah, through that, I really liked it. And I did end up getting an agent in high school, but that's when I started just doing all this stuff in my room, just playing with the muscle and seeing what I could do. But the get her done thing, I think, is from my dad, because he was always like, go big or go home.
Hmm.
Um, you know, my real last name is Skoreko. Leslie's my middle name. So it's like Skorekos don't quit. You see it
Hmm.
through. Like, the messaging was always very positive and optimistic, but also like, you can do it if you just put your mind to it. So I think it's definitely stuck with me. I mean, here I am, I'm still
Yeah.
in the game. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's something that I'm grateful that I had that sort of messaging from a young age. Um, and even after I graduated from theater school, I went to Ryerson here in Toronto.
Hmm.
I started to get out in the real world, and I was like, whoa, well, this is not what I sort of thought this was going to be.
Yeah. I don't, maybe you can't be prepared, but I
Yeah,
definitely
no,
don't feel anyone I know is prepared for the real world.
no.
It's
Yeah.
brutal.
Yeah. And so it's brutal. That's it. And so I remember I had moved back with my parents, and I remembered I was like, okay, I am not going to do this anymore. I'm going to be a private detective. So I'm looking up these online courses. And this was not like, it was probably like 6 months after I graduated. And my dad's like, you just trained for 3 years to be an actor. You're going to just leave it and go and be a private eye. Maybe give it a shot. I was like, fair point. Although I would have been a good PI, I think, but I'll play one on TV.
Yeah. Well, being a PI, though, interestingly, it tracks with being an actor, because being an actor, you are a detective of the character. You have to find yourself. You have to find the writer and the character that the writer wrote. So, I mean, the detective, all the nuance, the psychology, I mean, it's definitely part and parcel. It makes sense. That totally makes sense to me.
Right. And you're studying the individuals, which it definitely correlates. And you're researching, which I love to research when I get a scene and, the backstory and all of that stuff. So the researching part makes sense. You're right. It does definitely correlate to acting.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm curious, I don't know, maybe this is a leap, but you're obviously you're super artistic and creative and all the little projects that you have, and going back and thinking about, while you were doing monologues in your bedroom and being shy, do you think, and again, I may be totally off base, but do you think there's an element of you had an innate need for self-expression, and it wasn't that you were shy, it's that you didn't have the right way to express yourself yet. And you were looking for, because you do so many things, and now shy is the last word I would use to describe you.
No, I'm not shy anymore.
Right. And so I'm wondering if maybe, I don't know, maybe it's a perfectionism thing, but maybe there's something that you were like, I need the right way to express myself. I need to be seen the way I want to be seen, or something along those lines.
I think that's right. I'm the youngest child. I have a sister who's 3 years older, and my dad is extremely loud and boisterous, funny guy. My sister's also very loud. My mom is the opposite, very quiet. And being the younger, shy kid, I was not heard a lot. Not that they weren't trying to hear me. It's just that life is busy. And I think that because I'm such a creative person, that I would, I'd go in there and some of the scenes I would do. I remember this one monologue. I loved it. It was so dark. It was this couple, and they were making out in a car, but the carbon monoxide went in through the windows, and he wait, oh no, what, that couldn't have been it, because she lived. It must have been he was in a car and he died. And the whole monologue, because the carbon monoxide came in, and the whole monologue is, oh, if the windows were open just a crack, and she's crying because she lost this person she loved. And I remembered really connecting and wanting to feel that emotion and express it. And so there's that one side of that artistic way. And then the other thing I was doing a lot during high school was photography. So I took my summer earnings and I went and bought an enlarger, and I got the chemicals, and I created a dark room in my parents' cold cellar, which is not good because it wasn't ventilated. So let's hope none of this shows up in my coming years. But I spent a lot of time creating, and so you're right, those were outlets for me to express, I guess, creatively. And it's still to this day, to your point, like when I'm not working as an actor, I need to be either writing, or now I've found the resin art, and I need to be doing something creative.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like every time I turn around, you've got some new creative outlet or a new aspect of it that I'm like, wait, when did you start doing this? Like the first time I saw the resin, I was like, how long has this been going on?
Well, that sort of was it started in the pandemic, because the kids were at home. John was back at home. He hosts a television show. So our house was really stretched, and I didn't have anywhere to go. Prior to that, the kids were at school. John was in the studio, and I had a lot of time to myself and space to do my voice auditions, do my self-tapes. And so
But that
I
wasn't
was almost,
enough. You needed, you needed more.
well, it was almost out of necessity. And to be honest with you, it was just going to be a one-time thing. I saw, believe it or not, an Instagram, one of those sponsored ad that
Yeah.
comes across your feed, and it's like, make these geode coasters, and I'm like, oh, okay. So I ordered this starter kit of resin, and they were awful. Like they didn't harden properly. It was
Mm,
not a good. I was like, oh, this is really hard. But then what did I do? Dove in further. And you're right about the perfection thing, I think, because it became a challenge for me. I wanted to perfect it. I was like,
yeah.
this is really difficult, but I will master this. And there was actually a stretch there because I do ocean art and the ocean
Yeah.
waves, and I couldn't get the lacing of the waves how I wanted them to be. And I became a little bit obsessed. And there was like a 3-month stretch where I said to John, I can't do it the way I want to do it. I've watched so many videos because I'm self-taught,
Yeah.
and I'm learning and I'm watching and I'm trying. And then one day it clicked. And it was also, it's a science too, this,
Oh,
because it
yeah.
has to be a certain temperature, and the weight of the pigment changes the way it operates, and the
Hmm.
heat gun setting and the angle. So once I mastered it, it was like, oh, I've done it. I can do this. And now I just look at the old stuff. I'm like, what was that?
Yeah.
And it's the same thing for me with writing. Like I've written pilots and scripts over the years, and I always like to revisit them a couple years later. And sometimes I'm like, that's great. And other times you're like, what was I thinking?
Yep. It's funny. I look back at some of the stuff that I wrote in the process, and the hardest thing for me was doing horrible things to the people that I had feelings for. These characters that I created. I had these feelings for these characters, and I'm like, oh God, I gotta kill them, or I gotta, break their leg, or I've got to do something horrible to them. And it was like, oh God, this is the worst.
Oh my gosh. It's like Stephen King or like Misery.
Yeah, yeah. The hobbling and
Right.
misery. Yeah, yeah. Because I mean, to some extent, whatever you're working on, you love. I mean, this is an extension of yourself.
Yeah.
And, when you're writing characters, it's like, you don't want them. It's like your children. You don't want, I mean, I don't have kids, but I'm assuming, I'm assuming would be apropos. You don't want them hurt. You don't want them
No.
experiencing, the traumas if you can keep them from it. So same thing with
Yeah.
writing.
Yeah. 100%. I agree.
Yeah. It's funny. I think, um, time will tell. I mean, I kind of fantasize about getting back to writing.
Yeah.
I still make notes, and I still kind of will write little scenes or whatever. But I definitely think that either adaptation of real stories would be better or easier for me, more fulfilling, because it's like, well, it's already happened. Like, I'm not hurting this person.
Yeah.
I'm just, sculpting what actually took place.
Well,
Or
many of the successful shows, they're like, oh, it was my Aunt Sheila, and I just made them this character. And,
yeah,
they always say, write what you know, which is good and bad, I think, because
yeah,
then the people will see it or read it and
and then wonder
wonder.
or
Because
ask
I wrote,
questions.
right, because I wrote a book, actually, a young adult novel in, I don't know, 2019. It was right before the pandemic. And there's a lot of real stories in that book, like a
Yeah, I
lot.
remember that was on, you put that on what pad or something like that.
Yeah. So it was on Wattpad because I was working for Wattpad at the time. I was a content producer and did like shows for them and tap fiction stories and stuff. So I was writing for them. And then outside of that, I wrote this book and I put it on Wattpad, and then I self-published on Amazon. But it's a diary, like it's a first person from a teenage voice. So there
Mhm.
actually was stuff in there from my teenage like diaries and poetry books that I went and I had found in my parents' house. Because I mean, I moved to New York in 2005 and I just like left everything. Like there's just like all this stuff. Like I was like, see you later.
Yeah.
So I found these. And so there's a lot of real stuff from my journals, but then there's also, it's a fake story as well. But then there's real stuff that like from my relationships and people I
Mhm.
knew. So anybody that read that knows, they're like, so it's a vulnerable place
Oh,
to
yeah.
put myself in, because some people might be like, you put that in your book? How dare you? But you know what?
But
It's
the other side
real.
of that is if 30,000 people read it, or 500,000, or 6 million, there's probably only 3 people that know what was
Yeah,
real and what's not.
exactly.
you know and none of them read it, probably.
That's right. That's what I was figuring.
Yeah.
Except one, oh yeah. Well, anyway, I don't know. I digress.
So okay, I'm just kind of curious if I think I would find it interesting. So you've listed off a few different things. You do resin, you're writing, you're an actor. Would you just kind of go down the list for me? I'm just kind of curious, since high school, since you got out into the real world, you started acting, how many different jobs, professions, or hobbies that have kind of turned into businesses have you had?
Okay, let's go through this. This should be interesting. All right. So, yeah, I was doing photography and acting in high school, and then I got into both, but I went to theater school instead of photography. Then I graduated and I was a Bud Angel, which means I toured around with Budweiser, and it was a
Oh,
promo modeling gig, but I wasn't in a bathing suit. I was the badass NASCAR tire
yeah.
changing chick. So I would go to bars, and
I think you
I was the
posted a picture. I
manager.
think I saw something,
Yeah.
yeah, years
Yeah.
back.
Yeah. So I was the manager. There was me, a guy, and another girl, and we would go around Ontario in this huge cube van. And inside of it was a replica NASCAR, which we would unload and bring into a bar. And there was a contest. And if the people won, they would get like prizes, or a trip to New York was one of them.
Oh, wow.
And they'd have to try to change the tires faster than me and my partner, Andrea. So 2 chicks, and nobody could do it because obviously we were trained. My
Wait,
arms have never looked so good.
so you literally had to change the equivalent of an NASCAR tire there on the spot
Yeah. And it was
multiple times a
timed.
day?
Yeah. So we would just, oh yeah. So it was great. Like we'd be lifting the tire, my arms were totally back. And nobody could beat us. I think maybe once in that whole tour, one team of guys beat us. It was 2 guys each time to try and beat our time. So there was that. Then, this is a good one.
Were you ever asked to, like, by the higher ups to, hey, let someone win so that we can say someone has won? Or was it?
Oh, they would still get like hats and t-shirts
Okay.
and like beer. Like it was still like they'd
So
get
it's still
stuff.
fun. It's still right.
Yeah. And like someone won a trip to New York. So people did win, but it was
Yeah.
like, I forget how it was structured. It was many moons ago, but there was still happiness going on.
Yeah. No, that's great. I mean, but it's just so funny. I'm imagining, you and another woman just kicking butt and changing
Yeah.
tires, and people just going, what the hell is going on here? Because this was,
Yeah. Well, they feel like they're rugged, but it was like we clearly had trained to do it.
and this is before
yeah.
New York. So this is 20 years ago then.
Yeah.
So this is before
This would have been like 2002, maybe 2000
Yeah.
and yeah, probably around there.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. All right.
So that was super fun. And with that company, I did all kinds of fun stuff. I did like a promo for Labatt where we were trying to fake picket on the streets of downtown Toronto, where we had picket signs. And that was really an acting sort of gig because we acted like it was real. We were trying to do a 4-day work week, I think it was, or start work late or something. And we're out there picketing, but then it was really like the Labatt sign was this small. So we would like try to get people to sign this petition, but it was all just like a joke. So that was all through that same like promo modeling stuff. I did some weird stuff.
Sounds like a good thing, a 4-day work week, though. I think
I know, right?
Definitely should be the norm.
Who has that? Someone has that now. Is it like
someone.
Switzerland, Norway? I don't know. Anyway, one of the gigs I did through that though was like, I don't regret a lot of things in my life. This one, I look back and I'm like, eesh. So I had to be painted all gold, my entire face. And I was wearing like this gold sparkly bikini top. And I was the gold girl at like a fancy work event, like a, she la la thing. However, what they failed to tell me when I signed up for this, because I was always like, I'll only do the like really fun stuff, like I'm not in a bathing. This one, they're like, it's going to be really fast. It's like 2 hours. No, I had to be in the middle of a table.
You like standing on a table?
No. So they cut out a circle. And so
that might be worse.
They had food around the table, and I'm in
worse.
the middle, painted gold. And I'm like, what am I doing here? This is bad. I need to get
Wow.
out of here. Even the people at the event felt bad for me. Like it was
Oh
not
yeah.
like the men were like, "Are you cold?
It's your
Are
prison.
you okay?" Like I couldn't even walk around, which they never
Yeah.
told me. So I think I left early. I think I was like, this is dumb. Anyway, but the next job I did was I was a okay, so I worked for a magician company
Oh, cool.
and I taught kids magic after school at first. And then I didn't like that very much because the tricks that they taught me were super simple. And this was a sophisticated private school in Toronto. And
So
the
they were
kids
figuring
were
it out.
like, "What are you doing? I can see the ball." And they're like, I don't know, they're talking about famous basketball players coming to their house after school. So I pivoted and I started working in the office, and I actually became a talent agent for magicians.
Oh
And
wow.
this was a company of magicians all over North America. So I was like the booker for the shows, and it
God, that
was
must have
super
been
fun.
great training to understand the entertainment business from,
Yeah.
from an acting side.
Yeah. And
Because
it was great. And at the same time, I was auditioning and they were flexible. So I could go and work and then come back and do this.
yeah.
And that was like same, like right after I graduated, after I had done the summer of the bud stuff and the promo stuff. Um, so there was that. Then when I moved to New York, I was a red carpet host for Entertainment Weekly. So I did all the, Sundance and TIFF and the EW parties and the Emmy parties. And I
Nice.
would fly to LA and then Toronto, but I was based in New York. So that was a really cool gig.
So wait, that sounds like it would be a little bit more difficult to get than,
Yeah.
receptionist or a booker or, because I mean, I have to imagine the Bud Girl and the Labatt thing to a certain extent, being an attractive woman, young, was probably the number one qualification. Then number two, are you strong or will you get
Well,
strong?
so for the bud thing, it was mainly, yes, are you attractive? But they also, for that particular gig, wanted personality. So they did want funny people
Yeah.
because they wanted it to be people that could talk with people and be like one of the guys more at the bar rather than the typical, I'm a bud girl in the bathing suit. Not
Yeah.
that I'm
Yeah. Yeah.
saying, but they just wanted that. But absolutely. So when I got this gig, everybody was like, huh? Because I was fairly new to New York.
Yeah.
And being a Canadian, you have to get an O1 visa, which
Mm-hmm.
is an alien of extraordinary ability. And so it
I feel
was,
like you should just put that on your resume. I'm an alien of extraordinary ability.
I know,
Like
I
that's my
almost,
number one talent.
right. I almost wrote a short film about that called Alien of Extraordinary Ability, and then I didn't. So to your point about all the things that I do and all the things I see through, you should realize how many ideas I have
Oh yeah.
that have never seen the light of day or have never
Oh
come to
yeah.
fruition.
I know
So
that personally.
right, but I get
Yeah.
excited when I see it through. I'm like, I've done this. I had an idea and I made a product. And that's part of the reason I love doing the resin, because you get to see something so
Yeah.
quickly, right? When you work in this business, sometimes it takes a year before you even see what you worked on. And of
Yeah.
course you love being in the moment and doing the scene and having that great time with the other actors on set, but then you're like, where is it? It's
Very
in a world
ephemeral.
thing.
Yeah, very
Right.
ephemeral. I mean, yeah, I think one of the reasons why I love acting though is also because I get to tackle new things constantly. So it's,
Yeah.
it's kind of going back to that perfectionism kind of thing, because there's every single character's new, every single project's new, every single audition is new. And um it's unfortunately there's no money in just enjoying the newness of auditions.
Right. I know.
um
Yeah.
or the newness of projects. It's unfortunate because God, I'm sure the two of us would be, have ridiculous sums of money if all of our ventures were to be
Honestly, if you
fruitful.
think
But
about the amount of, I don't think people, I mean, some people realize, but I don't think everyone fully understands how much time and work goes into all of the auditions and
no,
and everything. And so when people are like, oh, well, they were an overnight success. No, they weren't. Go
no.
look at their IMDb. Go look. They've been doing this. They've been slogging away for years and years and years. Most of them.
Yeah.
There's the
I mean,
odd case.
there's the odd case, but even I did an episode of a show, I don't know how many years back, and the lead one of the 6 leads. He was kind of the boyfriend of the show. This was his first TV job, had no TV credits. Here I am struggling to get an audition for a decent role. And I've got a bunch of co-stars and other TV credits and film credits and so forth. He's got 0 film and TV credits. And he wasn't on Broadway. I think he had done some, little theater show in the Village, and the writer of the show happened to live there, see him, and just like, oh, he's perfect. And plugged him right in. I see him all the time now. He's not famous. I don't know if I'd call him a good actor. I don't know if I'd call him charismatic, but he's been working for at least the last 10 years.
Wow. There is that sort of muse thing that happens. There's a movie that I actually want to see called Licorice Pizza.
Yeah.
You've seen that one?
I haven't seen it yet. I want to see it.
Right. And she's a singer, the star, but there's a whole backstory and connect through her mom teaching. What's the director's name? It's escaping me. Anyways, she taught him.
Famous
and
guy.
Then famous. Oh, yeah. It's embarrassing that I'm not saying his name.
Yep.
Anyway, she taught him in high school, and he was aware of her at Coachella, and he got to know her through her music, and he started directing her music videos. And then it sort of came about that the mom, she's like, my mom taught you. And he goes, oh, who's your mom? But then he loved her. She was like this great teacher, and he still had a painting that she had guided him through. Right. And so he said, one day I'm going to put you in a movie. And he did. And she's the star of Licorice Pizza. But she never knew she had that in her. Like, he believed she could be the lead of this movie just from knowing her from her, I guess, her performing in the music and stuff, which is still performing. It's just a different thing.
Yeah. Different venue.
So there are these stories where it happens, but oftentimes it's many years of all this stuff that you don't get paid for.
Yeah. And then even mega famous people have difficult times getting projects made and getting things, off the ground, because there's so much money involved. There's so many people involved. A single day on a network TV show is like, several $100,000 budget for one day.
Yeah.
And, so I get it. I understand. But at the same token, I have no interest in complaining about the film industry. It just is what it is. It's a difficult business that outsiders can't possibly understand, because it does not operate like any other industry.
No.
So, just to get back to how you ended up as an interview on red carpets.
Oh yeah.
You're doing all the things. And did you ever want to be a host or an interviewer or anything like that?
Yeah. So that's actually a really interesting story, how it came about. There's 2 things that happen. And again, these are things like, I always like to think about the movie Benjamin Button, when those certain timing and things and all these sequence of events happen, she gets hit by the bike and all these things happen to lead to that one thing. So I often think about, well, I met this person who introduced me to this person, and I took this film class, and that's how I came to meet John or whatever. So with this in New York, I landed in New York, and I thought, well, I don't know where to begin here. So I was going on, do you remember Mandy.com?
Oh yeah.
So
is that still a thing?
I don't know, but I hit Mandy hard, and Craigslist, like anything that came up that didn't seem like it was porn or I was going to die.
When Craigslist was a little bit more reputable at the time.
Yeah, it was a little better then, but Mandy was definitely, they had legit stuff. And so I had actually got this project called the Captain Humphreys Project. Now, this was a web series. This was a YouTube show about a man sailing around the world in the smallest boat.
Nice. Wait, but this is so YouTube was 2004. So this was
2006, I want to say.
So a couple of years into, what do we do with this new internet thing?
Yeah. So it was really new. And I went to this audition, and it was at a brownstone on the Upper West Side, beautiful, large brownstone. But I did text John at the time, We were just dating. We weren't married. And I said, this is the address I'm at. I've gone to this audition, but I'm not entirely sure. If you don't hear from me in 30 minutes, call the police. I went in, super nice guys, David O'Connor and his father, and they cast me in this Captain Humphrey show as a host. And I was really excited because it was, YouTube, and I felt like it was a new, like the forefront and doing this. He's Carol O'Connor's nephew, Archie Bunker.
Yeah.
So that's just how funny New York is. I didn't even know that when I started working with them. And then it made sense how they had this humongous brownstone on the Upper West Side, because they were just sort of making these web shows. And so I had footage from that as a host.
Okay.
I had started working in voiceovers. So I had the process. My O1 visa was in thing, but I needed more of a sponsor. So I had the agent. I was working with Innovative, which I can tell you how I got with them as well as a separate story. There's all these things, as I'm saying,
yeah,
that
they're
aligned.
a big agency. I mean, Innovative is no joke. I mean, even to this day, at the time in New York, I think they were even bigger than LA. Like their New York office was like way bigger and more powerful.
Yes. I think who was there? Like celebrities would walk in all the time. Like Marissa Tomei came in all the time. Anyway, so I had that going, and I needed like the O1 was in process. So I was already wheels and like I could work, right? So through the voice stuff I was doing through Innovative, and I'll tell you how I got with Innovative. And so this thing comes on Mandy.com, and it's like red carpet host audition. And I don't even think it said Entertainment Weekly. It was just like interview celebrities, blah, blah, blah. So I'm like, okay, cool.
I can do that.
Submit. Right.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I could do that. I'd love to do that. So I submit through Mandy, and I get the call. I go and meet with them at a coffee shop on the Upper West Side, and had a great interview, and they booked me and I got the job. But there's a funny part to this. They almost didn't see me. They almost didn't see me for the interview because I had done hosting stuff in Toronto, but it was live. I didn't have like footage to send them, and they wanted a video clip. So the video I sent them was from this web show, the Captain Humphreys Project. However, when I sent the clip in, I didn't realize that the link would change the next day. So then they had several hosts.
Oh. So
there was another girl who they saw. So apparently the producers told me afterward, they were like, oh, no. And then the producer who hired me goes, no, but that name doesn't match up. That's not Caroline Lesley. That's this girl.
Thank God,
it almost
for
didn't happen.
To detail.
Right. And he was so attention to detail. This guy was like on point with, like, I worked with him for a few years doing this, and he was really that person. He was super, had his shit together, and a great producer. So he noticed and goes, hers is super funny. And what he saw, the hosting thing I had done was David Blaine had set up a sphere in the middle of Lincoln Center filled with water. And he was going to
holding the breath thing.
Yes. And so I did a hosting thing outside of the David Blaine thing, because all of these things were really wacky, and it was like not just tied to the man sailing around the world. This episode was me going up to like the security guard and like almost like Tom Green sort of stuff. I was like, but can we just move the ball like to the left? Like it's, and the security guard. So it was like a really funny kind of clip.
Nice.
And so that's what brought me in. They were like, that was hilarious. We loved it, but they almost didn't see it. Anyway, so that's how I got that job. And then that pushed through everything. And I got like the O1, and they sponsored me, and it was already in motion, and it really pushed it through. So it was like me being on top of things and hitting the ground running, but it was also really lucky, right? I mean, we hear this a lot, that sometimes these things happen because of that it was lucky. Like, what if he didn't see that it wasn't my name and just bypassed me? And I think that happens.
I know we're running out of time, so that's a perfect kind of segue to
I can
tie
go
this
a little
up.
longer.
Okay. So your series of events happening, and kind of luck playing into it. A lot of people, I would say, get in their own way. and trying
Mhm.
to explain to people, what it means to get in your own way and then how to get out of your own way, if that's what you're used to doing, is a really difficult thing, I think, to explain and show. And so my first question is, did you ever feel like you were in your own way? Because you've just had this trickle. I mean, you're able to rattle these things off, and they happen because you just put yourself out there. Miss, I used to be shy. So
Well, it's it's complicated, and I'm not sure I fully understand or know the answer, because I think what happens is if you overthink it, you're stuck, right? So sure, I was nervous and I thought, how would I ever get this audition through Mandy.com and that it's Entertainment Weekly? Like, it doesn't even seem real. You'd think it would
yeah,
go through a big agency, but it happened, right?
yeah.
And so in the moment when I get there, I think what happens to me is I do let go, right? I like, my brain goes away. Because when I was younger in my 20s, I couldn't, right? I was too stuck in my head, and
Mhm.
you're dead in the water. So I'm just being now. I can't explain how I got here. It took me a while.
Yeah,
I'm a
yeah.
late
Well, I
bloomer.
mean, well, I
I
don't know
wish it
that you're a
happened
late
sooner.
bloomer. I feel like I meet people all the time, not as much with the pandemic, but I used to meet people like really, really frequently. And I'd meet people, in their 50s and 60s that were still getting in their own way. I mean,
Yeah.
my father called me this morning to say, okay, what's going on here? He's into remote control airplanes now. He's retired. And so he's like, I have tremendous anxiety about going and flying. And my first thought I was like, well, just go and crash the plane, get it over with, and then you won't
Yeah.
have anxiety about it. But we
Right.
ended up talking for like 30 minutes. And the long story short is that he needs to feel productive because he was an entrepreneur. He spent his entire life, building business and creating new things, and he's bored. And
Right.
so now he's creating mountains out of molehills,
Yeah.
for his enjoyment, to have a sense of um, consequence and anxiety and difficulty and struggle.
Yeah.
And he's
Um,
getting in his own way. So, like, you, in
yeah.
the time I've
I
known you, you don't do that, or at least
well,
obvious.
I will say this. To talk about what you just mentioned with your father, and to sort of understand how I operate. My dad did always say, another thing he said is, there is nothing to fear except fear itself.
Yeah.
And I do live my life that
JFK,
way,
famous
right?
quote.
And he said it over and over growing up. And I
Yeah,
do live my life subscribing to that. But
that's awesome.
many days I'm not, like, I try to do one thing every day, so it scares me, but it can be different levels of that. And many days I
Mhm.
don't. But uh I think the other day, John and I were sort of talking about it. There must be some sort of element where I am a bit of a thrill seeker, I think, because a lot of the things I've done in my life, like, there was an independent film I did in New York where I had to jump out of a plane, and for the role, because she was scared of heights. And, that's definitely like a thrill seeking type of thing.
Yeah.
Or even just, going to set, what we do when you're not the lead of the show every day, you're walking into the unknown
Oh yeah.
and meeting new people and performing. And for a lot of people, that would be the most terrifying thing in the entire universe. Um, but once you get past the whatever, the nerves or the fear, you're just in it. Like, another thing I did when I was doing that early on, hosting wacky stuff in New York,
Mhm.
was Fleet Week came to New York, and all the sailors were lined up in a formation
Oh, cool.
on the outside of the
The
aircraft
Hudson,
carrier,
or yeah, okay.
on the one of the piers by the Hudson. And he's like, "Hey, go." My producer was like, "Hey, go, you're gonna go sing." And he wrote this song, Fleet Week, and they're all in formation, and I'm in like a little jean skirt, and I'm singing with a microphone this song in front of all these sailors. And I look back and I'm like, holy, that was, because they're all like not moving a muscle because they're in formation and they can't. I'm like trying to, like, so it was kind of like, fun, but also doing something that scared you and conquering that fear. Like even this past weekend, I hadn't skied in like 20 years. And so that for me was something that scared me that day. And I did a lesson and he's like, do you think you can ski this hill? And they're fairly large hills because it's my sister's private ski club. And I look up and I'm like, your guess is as good as mine. And he's like, all right, let's go. And I'm like, okay. But then it was the same thing, right? So I get to the top of the hill and I was scared and I looked down and I'm like, I don't know if I can do this. And then I went, stop, just do it. Because if you're going to overthink this right now, you're going to fall, hurt yourself, whatever. You need to just go off the cliff, as it were. I'm going off the cliff. And I did just fine. And we did several runs and I had a great time and I'm glad I did it. And afterwards, John goes, I couldn't tell you were scared at all. And I said, well, I can mask it pretty good. But I was literally like, I don't know. But I think that you just, I don't know, like you're saying that you just go for it. But when I think of it, I always think that it's weird. Like for my brain, I'm like, oh, wow. I think because that little person is always still inside of us, right? Like you don't let go of who you are innately and your childhood. And I think that sometimes I'm still that shy little girl, but then you're right. I look at all this stuff. I'm like, yeah, I guess I'm not.
I mean, when you move, some would say just moving to New York is a massive undertaking. So when you moved to New York, was there any trepidation? Was there anything like, or did your parents or did anyone say, New York's dangerous?
Well, it's a really good question because ever since I was 14, I had a plan that I wanted to go to California. I wanted to go to LA. And then
so you got segued or sidetracked.
Yeah. But it happened because of John. So John was offered to do, we had only been dating for 1 year and he had been offered to do a year in New York at the NASDAQ covering the markets. And I went down and visited. Yeah, it was a great job for BNN and in Canada, which is the flagship business news channel. And he's like, do you want to come with me? And I was like, and it was like, whoa, like, first of all, this is a big step to move to New York. Second of all, this is a big step to move to New York with you.
Yeah.
We've only been dating a year.
And I mean, a year.
No.
A year's not a short time, but it's also not a long time. So had you talked about future, especially at that age? Had you talked about nothing? So there's no conversation of
we said we loved each other and I knew because I had dated other people for a year and a half. And by that point, you're always kind of like, like for me, at least, I was like, this is not going to work. But with
never
him,
took me that long, but
right. I'd always,
I'm like, this isn't going to work.
I know. Yeah, but here's what I would do. I would torture myself. So it'd be like 6 months. I'm like, it's not going to work. Maybe we'll try them another 6 months. Why was I dragging it out? Right. Anyway, with John, I knew, but that's a very fair question about like my parents. They were really supportive. And
that's amazing.
Yeah. They were like, you've wanted to go and see what the American market is like. It's New York. It's not LA, but you can get to LA, which I got to LA.
Yeah.
And so I dove in and then it was only supposed to be a year and we were in New York for 6 years.
Oh, wow. Okay. And that was because of his job or because a combination?
Well, because we didn't want to leave. So New York was really good to me and it was really good to John. And we both had wonderful success in New York. So we just stayed. I think I was on 201 visas there. And John moved to Bloomberg News in the US and he was doing work with CNN. And so why leave when you're
on top of
in New
world.
York? Yeah. So, and then we moved to the West Coast. We moved to San Francisco in 2011.
Just out of curiosity, just to kind of, if you don't mind digging a little bit deeper, was it just like, well, face your fears, have nothing to fear but fear itself? Or was there any kind of a deeper introspective process or ritual or anything that you did regarding John in New York? I mean, because those are two massive things all at the same time. You're taking a relationship to the next level. You're leaving everything, you're moving to a new country, not just New York City, which is for any American is a big deal to move to New York City. but it's a new country as well. So,
Yeah. And I didn't have my working papers yet.
oh, so you didn't even know how you were going to make a living at that point in time, or,
No,
oh, wow.
no.
So
I
you,
knew that I wanted to act and that I wanted
yeah,
to try to get a visa in New York. I had been talking about it in Toronto and talking with people about how you do that. But no, I knew that I could stay for 6 months because as a Canadian, you're allowed to come to the US for 6 months
okay.
at a time. And then you have to go back. So I went back and then I came back. So I knew that like I'd have to figure it out or I
Yeah,
couldn't
yeah.
stay. But at that
So,
time, it was only supposed to be a year. But no, to answer your question, I think with me, it's more of a gut instinct
mm,
sort of thing where I can't explain it, but I don't overthink it like
mhm.
cerebrally, but I just know that this is the right course of action. And it's happened to me several times in my life where it kicks in and I'm
Where it's
like,
just like, this is the right thing to do.
this is what we have to, this is what I have to do. And, or this is
Yeah.
what we have to do. And when it doesn't, I get like, oh, what's happening? Why is it not kicking in? And I like, it bugs me because
Yeah.
I want to make the decision. I want to know what the next thing is. And if I'm just sort of floating around and I'm in between things, then I feel put off.
It's really super interesting to me because I have a theory about instincts and decision making that it's a learned process, and you can learn to have better instincts. You can learn to make better decisions. And I've actually been trying to create a course around decision making. And I think I kind of have the nuts and bolts figured out, but I haven't really been able to road test it yet. And I'm curious, you know, because you're a person of instinct, and because, a lot of what you're doing sounds like you're trusting your inner voice, your instincts, and you've developed that. It seems like you've really developed that. Are you able to track? Does that make sense to you that, instincts are something learned and something that you grow over time? Does that track for you in your experience?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it does for sure. And they've gotten better
Mm-hmm.
over the years and just navigating also my life and what I have time for and what I don't have time for. And I think it's important to note that being able to do what's right for you and being able to say no sometimes is okay.
Yeah.
I think especially as actors, because we're so far down the totem pole, many times we're just trying to please everybody. Now that I'm a strong female in my early 40s, I'm able to, I can do what's right for me and say no to things. And
Yep.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah. I think that's a really, really important. I wish I had understood more of, the saying no in the beginning. And I think my path would have just drastically been different. And maybe I wouldn't have done as much stuff. Maybe I would have done completely different stuff. It's impossible to really know. But saying no and saying, well, this isn't how I see my life, and accepting this just because it's an acting job is not necessarily the right choice.
Mm-hmm. Right.
There's something to be said for saying, I have a vision for my life and I'm going to stick to it. And I feel like I definitely did not do that when I got
Mm-hmm.
here.
Did you do it
I
at all? Like I did say no to a few things. One of them's a really interesting story if you want to hear it.
Yeah, I'm curious.
So, the cult movie, The Human Centipede?
Oh God. Yeah.
When I lived in New York, I had a very interesting, colorful manager.
Uh-huh.
And she said, I have this audition for you. It's over Zoom, and they're in what's it called? The Netherlands.
Uh-huh.
They're in Holland, and you'll do this Zoom audition. And it was for The Human Centipede. And they had seen this short film that I did where I was tied up in an insane asylum, locked up, screaming, like very much the role, the lead
Yeah.
girl. So they had me audition, and they literally were like showing me drawings, like holding up pictures of the girl with the bum and the face and the
Mhm.
ass.
And
And they're like,
yeah.
yep, six productions, and they're like, you good with this? And I'm like, yes, because I was like on the Zoom call and you say yes
Oh yeah.
to
Oh no.
everything.
Yeah.
And I'm just, yes. When it wasn't Zoom, it was Skype back then. And whatever. So I on the call. And so she says, you've got the part, you've booked it. And so this is again, the instinct thing, the gut, whatever.
Yeah.
I
You sit
just,
back.
I started crying, and then I'm like, and then John comes home, and I think we were engaged at that time. And he's like, what's wrong? I was like, well, I got this part. It's a lead in the movie. He goes, why are you crying? It's a lead in the movie. I said, well, because I don't really want to go to Holland and film this because like it's topless and then you're eating the bum. And anyway, so I turned it down. So people are like, oh,
what was his reaction? Like, you can't skip over that.
he actually was like, if you want to do this, you can do it. Like,
That's
he
awesome.
wasn't like X, no, you're not.
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
never been like that. He's not possessive, and he's not one of those guys. He's always supportive. If I think it's great, he's like, okay.
He trusts you and your instincts to know that, hey, if this is the right thing, then it's the right thing. Yeah. That's
And
amazing.
so some
That's
people
really
are like,
amazing.
and then I never knew it was going to become so then we were walking in the East Village with a good friend of mine in New York, and I saw it. This is like a couple years later on the marquee at this indie thing. I said, no. Oh my God. And so my friend Ellie, he's like, well, we have to go see it. So we went and we all saw it together. But I don't regret it. I mean, it did great, good for them, but it just wasn't right for me at the time. And the manager was furious. She kept, needless to say, we went our separate ways, but she kept phoning. They want you to, I also just, and so to your point there, I wasn't afraid of the content. I was more afraid of, and like you said, you don't seem afraid of anything, but I was afraid that I didn't know who these people were. And it was in the Netherlands. And like, I don't know, like, what if I went there and it was some crazy like porn set? Like, I didn't know anything about it.
And that's one of the crazy
And it was
things
non-union.
Oh yeah. I mean, that adds another level of, or a layer of like uncertainty of what is this and what is it going to become?
Right.
I mean, as an actor, in the beginning, I mean, still where I'm at, I mean, I guess I'm at the beginning. I have no control over the end product. The only way I have control over the end product is if I produce it. And I've produced a few things. I've produced tons of short films. I have a feature film out there, and I don't know how much control I had over the final product. You know what I mean? And so there's that side. And then as just a bit player, someone coming in for a couple days or a week or whatever it is, like, your job is, you're one of the last pieces of the puzzle. You've got to trust everyone else. You've got to trust all the other actors. You got to trust all of the creative people, the producers, director, everyone, that they have a vision that this is going to be something worthwhile. And I don't know, the only way, perhaps the only way you could determine whether it's worth it or not is based on reputation. And what's the reputation of the other actors, the other writers, the directors, the producers and whatever. But other than that, like, it's not like you're going to work for IBM or Apple. I guess IBM, I don't know, does it exist anymore? I've staged myself a lot there. Apple or whoever, like, where you're going to get paid, you're going to, or some architectural firm where it's like, they're going to pay you a salary. This is going to be what it is. You're going to sit in a desk and you're going to draw. Done.
And you're in control. But I think, there you can get control if you're the director. But I've listened to a lot of these podcasts where like many of the actors are like, no, I don't want to pick the shirt and I don't want to be the director. I don't want that much control. I just want to focus on doing my work in my scene. But I think it's also about the experience you have, right? So sometimes you go in and you do your thing and you leave. And sometimes it's more meaningful, or the connections you make. Like, I just worked on a female driven show. I'm not saying that it couldn't have been men, but this was the experience on this show. And it was Why the Last Man, and it was female director, cinematographer. I mean, the experience was amazing. I had one day on that set, but we did a read through with the whole cast over Zoom that I was invited to. We did a rehearsal for just our scene with the director and the showrunner, and talked about where our characters were coming from. I mean, the experience was like amazing. So when do you get that? You don't usually get that. doing a day player, usually
Yeah.
coming in. So I just was like, I want more of that. That felt really good.
Yeah.
So,
Yes, please. Yeah. There's something amazing when you get to be involved with a project. And I think this isn't just acting. I think this is any kind of project.
yeah.
I would imagine, architects go through the same thing where everyone is supportive and everyone is collaborative and everyone wants everyone to win. That's that the
Yeah.
whole win-win concept. And that there's a level of, I don't know if nurturing is the right word, but
Yeah. I think it is.
yeah, nurturing, cultivation. I mean,
That everybody's voice is meaningful.
yeah, because I mean, I don't know, like one of the things that I love about the film industry so much is that you get on set and if it's a good set, you know it immediately because everyone's doing what they're supposed to do and everyone knows what
Right.
they're supposed to do, whether it's a grip, whether it's a wardrobe, doesn't matter which department, crafty, it doesn't matter which department, everyone knows what their job is, how to do
Yes.
it and where they're supposed to be.
Right.
And it's like a
It's
train
like a
engine.
machine. It's a
Yeah.
machine. But I think where like the anxiety part for people can dissipate is when you realize that you're just a little tiny puzzle piece in this big machine that's moving, and everyone is at the top of their game, just doing what they know how to do. And you don't worry about them and they're not
Yeah.
worried about you.
And I think there's a level of respect on the sets that are easy because everyone's so good at their job. Everyone respects everyone for doing their job and doing it
Yes.
well. So you don't get into that, like, oh, like camera department's lagging again, like,
Right. Right.
or,
Yeah.
whatever it is. It's like
Yeah.
everyone's doing their job and everyone respects everyone and everyone wants everyone to look amazing.
Right.
And I think that's the difference. That's the
And it is a
thing.
magical experience when it is working correctly,
Oh
and
yeah.
it's like clockwork. It's a nice feeling
Oh yeah.
because
And
it's buzzing and it's busy, but you're all there for a collective goal.
yeah, I imagine when you figured out, I mean, it's got to be the same thing when you figured out the right technique on blowing the ocean and getting the ocean on your resin. There had to have been a similar feeling, except it was just a smaller scale where it's just you and the materials and the tools, where all of a sudden everything is just clicking and it just works.
Yes,
Same thing, yeah.
it's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's absolutely the same thing. And I even got scared when I did a larger scale resin project. I did a table, I did a coffee table, and I poured 2 double waves, and it was the biggest, pour. I was like, I kept waiting. I'm like, hey, I kept pushing it off. And then, I did it one day and it was such a great feeling. Like I did get the same sort of endorphins that you get when you go to set and things click in because it turned out great. Obviously it would have been a real buzzkill if it looked shitty, but it looked really great. So I was like, okay, I conquered the fear and I have this beautiful table. So,
but you also worked up to it. I mean, it's not like you just said, okay, I'm going to do a table like you,
no,
because
and
I've
preparation is
seen,
key.
yeah. I mean,
Same
you
thing with
had so many
acting.
little things. Yeah. And that, I mean, I think one of the things that I don't know if it's, I'm getting older or if maybe I've just always been this way, but like, when I think of the concept of the singularity in physics or in spirituality, the oneness or whatever, it's like everything's connected. Everything's just
Yeah.
the same. And it's just
Yep.
all different expressions of the exact same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the way I look at it. And maybe I've always seen it that way. I don't know.
It is all the same. And if you, because we all get caught up in our microcosms, right?
Yeah.
Whatever it may be at that moment. Like I can look through my trajectory of my life and be like, at that moment I was here and those people in my world were so important.
Yeah.
But if you like stand up here at whatever 500,000 degree, I don't know what you want to call it, and you're looked down,
Yep.
we're all just like ants, like, right?
Yeah,
Like John
yeah.
and I were talking about this the other day. We're just these like beings that are going through this life. And when you kind of like think of it like that, like I think when you're younger, or maybe not everybody, but for me, everything was do or die. It was so precious,
So
right?
dramatic. Oh
so
yeah.
dramatic. And now I'm like, oh, this is all good. Let's just, do our job and have a good time and be
Oh
smart
yeah.
about things.
I mean,
And
that's one of the things that drew me to performing as well, is there was it was okay to be dramatic. It was okay to have emotions. It was okay to be angry. It was okay to be
yeah,
happy. It was just the place where everything was okay, because you're human, and your job is to be a fully fledged, three-dimensional human on stage, or in front of the
yeah,
camera. And I felt like it was the only place where it was okay to be fully me, or fully a human. That was what it was for me. That was the big draw. And then the second big draw for me was, I love the everyone knows what to do, and like the synchronicity of it all. Like,
yeah.
it was magic. It still is.
Yeah, it is magic. And that's interesting about the being you. Like I'm trying to think if that was it for me. And I don't know, because I think that I was always a bit weird. So I was weird in my regular life, but
Is anyone not weird though?
well, I
Seriously?
know. So what is weird? I mean, we could go down that path, right?
Yeah.
Like what is normal? What is sane? What are we all we're all insane. What's the line of sanity? And I know. And again, I guess that was a label. I mean, one of the things that I'm not sure you know this story, but so John and I met through
Oh,
Sam's
okay.
husband.
Yeah, yeah.
So Sam's husband said that John and I both had the same weird sense of humor, and he thought that we would get along. And so we met because of them. And
Wow.
I look back at that and I'm like, because I would never, I mean, John was like the people that he knew. He's like, I never thought I would meet my wife or that I would meet you, but he was right. He
Yeah.
did see something.
God, that's amazing.
And we're so different. Like we think very differently. Like he gets to A to B completely differently than how I
Mhm.
would go from A to B. I'm more abstract thinker. He's very much more linear, but he's still very artsy. So I think it's complicated also with relationships on how you connect. So that sense of humor piece that is a little wonky, weird, or whatever you want to call it, does connect.
Yeah. The
But
sense of humor is so important though.
it is important.
Ash and I, we probably spend more time laughing together. We're either just calm and in silence, or we're laughing. Like that's probably what we spend the most time doing. Either that, or I'm doing my thing and she's doing her thing. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
But the sense of humor, man, that's like, I mean, for me, maybe not everyone, but for me, I feel like if you can't laugh with someone,
No,
then what's the point of being
there's
around them?
there's no point.
Yeah.
So, to bring it full circle, my daughter last night, who was talking about the boys that she found cute or
Hmm.
whatever, she brought up this one boy and she said, well, he's okay, he's cute, but he's really funny. And I go, good. That is the most important. You want
Yeah.
to be able to laugh with somebody.
Yeah.
And because she has a great sense of humor and she's acting now too, and
Nice.
she's always, like she says, she wants to be a comedian, she's always doing good, and her friends are all goofy, and so she wants that, right? So it's so important. I think there's so many pieces of the puzzle with any relationship. It's sense of humor, it's intellect, it's so complicated, and people
Yeah.
change and you have to grow together.
It's funny. My father growing up, he was always Mr. Jokey Jokester. But the problem for me was that I was always the butt of the joke.
Oh no.
um
Oh no.
or my sister or my mom, but like, it was not a good place to be in. And
Yeah.
I loved doing comedy. Like, prior to coming out to LA, when I was doing theater here, there, and wherever, like comedy was my favorite. Neil Simon,
Where did you do theater?
I mean, regional stuff, local stuff. Nothing you would know, like no notable.
No, but where's home again?
Oh, Northern Virginia, DC.
Oh, so you did it there.
Yeah, but I didn't like. I I wanted to do TV and film so much that I felt like the arena stage and I'm blanking on some of the other big theaters there were too big of a distraction because it was like a whole nother world and a business.
Mm,
So I never went for anything big on the theater side. And that's probably my, if I'm going to regret anything, that would be what I would regret, because to me, I missed I missed an entire opportunity that I never really explored because I thought it was going to be a distraction from doing TV and film. And the
mm,
reason why TV and film was more attractive to me is because I felt like, obviously, it's a much bigger audience. And who doesn't want to have the biggest audience possible as an actor? It's like, okay, I need more people. Um, and then the other thing is there's an element of like it's it's more of a analog for life,
yeah.
film and TV, because you've got so many different departments and so many different elements and everyone has to work together. And I feel like that is more, I don't know, real. And I think I was looking for, as much as I loved performing and I loved the process of the rehearsal for theater, especially the rehearsal process for theater is amazing.
Hmm.
It's that detective thing, it's like you're really digging in.
Yeah.
um it was, it didn't have as many moving parts, and it wasn't as fully formed in my mind is what I think. I'm trying to remember it, you know 30
Yeah.
years ago,
Yeah.
and I feel like, it wasn't as real. It was like this imaginary place. Like, yeah, you have backstage theater, you have sets and so forth, but it's all just kind of more imaginary. I don't know.
Hmm.
And I wanted to live in my imagination and I wanted to play, but I felt like film and TV somehow was more real.
Yeah.
It was more, I don't know, human. There was more bigger of a machine. I don't know. I don't know if
Yeah.
that makes sense, but
But I think the point about living in your imagination is a big part of it, right? You
oh
want to
yeah.
play for a living and you
Yeah.
want to, and I've never wanted to escape who I am,
No.
but I want to go into these other worlds and be these other people. And I think it also just comes from being interested in how I was always interested in psychology and the abnormal
Mhm.
psychology and how the brain
Oh
works.
yeah.
And I
My
think it
favorite
comes from
characters are the most twisted, screwed up people.
same, same. And I read some books about twisted people, um and I had this abnormal psych book that I from university that I had
Mhm.
highlighted all this stuff. And I think it comes from just being fascinated with the way the brain works and
Oh yeah.
how even today we use so little of it. And but when you talked about the theater stuff, like because I went to theater school, I was a tough program, and when I left I was like, I don't want to do theater ever again. And so I
Uh,
took a break from theater,
so
and
I
that's
went
when I
to a liberal
started.
arts. I went Virginia Tech. I know it's a technical school, but they happen to have an amazing theater program. But it's not an MFA or a BFA, so it wasn't like you had to do your time in the costume department. You do your time in set design.
Oh, okay.
Um, so you weren't hyper focused. And I went there for two reasons. One, they had a great theater. It was an award-winning theater program when I went there in the mid 90s. And then all the buildings looked like castles, and I wanted to live in a castle.
That is a hilarious reason that you chose the school.
So yeah.
Mine did not, you know what ours was? So mine was a conservatory, and the building that our theater program was in was the old pharmacy building. And so there was a morgue in the
Oh,
basement.
fun.
Well, that's where the costume people were.
Yeah,
We were
of
on the
course.
third floor, but there was like all these silverfish on the ground.
Oh,
We
jeez.
would be doing like breathing exercise. It was gross,
Yeah.
but it was a tough program, and there was a lot of psychological ramifications for people, I think,
Yep.
as many we've heard about this with other theater schools as
Oh
well.
yeah.
But it took me a while, and then I did do theater in New York, and I do any in Toronto before I left? I don't think I did. I did some indie theater in New York, and then I did oh, this actually feeds into what you were saying about being fearless. I did a one woman show that I wrote that got into the New York Fringe, and it was at the Cherry Lane Theater in the
You got
West
into the
Village.
New York Fringe? So
Yeah.
I just casually did a one-woman show. I got into the New York Fringe, whatever. It's one other thing that I did.
I actually forgot until we started talking about theater. And I remember when I did it, everyone was like, she's doing a one-woman show. That's so scary. And
was it more of a comedic?
It was called Doppelganger Joe, and it was about a girl who finds her doppelganger, but she's from the UK. And then, the myth is that if you meet your doppelganger, you die, but it was a comedy version. And I played both of the roles. And then she feeds her this glass of bleach and she dies and all this stuff. So I remember it was like a great run. It was at the Cherry Lane. I got all the reviews. And then a friend of mine was like, you did great. You got mixed reviews for your first one-woman show. And I'm like, but that one review. And I remember I was so dramatic about it. We lived in a 5-floor walk-up. And it's one review, I didn't like it and I felt attacked. And I went down the 5 flights of stairs. I don't even know if I had shoes on. And I ran into the New York Night and I just started walking. I was just like,
oh, wow.
I came back. John's like, that was a bit, no, he was very supportive. But it was, it was like the big leagues. It was like all the New York people writing about it. And because I had written it too, it's all me. If you want to tear this place, it's all me. So if you don't like the writing, so now I look back and that actually was very fearless, but I wrote it not expecting to get in and was surprised that I got in. And then there was all kinds of stuff happening when I was rehearsing, like we got deported. Not really, but we did technically, we're told to leave the United States of America. Yeah. So we had to fly out the next morning. I had come back from Central Park with all these crates. I was rehearsing for the one-woman show and I buzzed John in the 5-floor walk-up and I said, can you help me? I have all this stuff from rehearsal. And he just goes, have I not told you this story? He comes through the buzzer and he goes, I've been advised to leave the country. And I was like, what? And he's like, you've been advised to as well. It's like,
what a weird thing to come home to.
I know. So I get these crates up the stairs. I'm like, what are you talking about? Long story, but our lawyer had missed a page on the request for more information. And that was one of the days that I'll never forget. Core memory, adrenaline, like brutal.
So, I mean, that's a good place to stick for a half a second. And we're way over. So if you need to go soon, let me know. But
I'll go soon.
that's a huge thing. You're living in the country for a couple years at that point.
So it was 2008.
So you've been there for
we moved
3
there
years?
Like 2.5.
2.5. You're settled. You're like, we're home. We love this place. We're making money. We're good. And then you come home from rehearsing and John's like, time to go. The government's kicking us out. Where did your mind go first? And how did you deal with the anxiety and the stress?
My mind went to confusion. And then I pulled up the emails and the documents, and then I saw that there was this scanned page that she had never told us to get these certain things. And then I got angry.
Yeah.
I mean, wouldn't you?
Probably.
And
for at least a minute.
So I called her and she said, no, the longer you stay, the worse it's going to be. Like, you guys have to leave tomorrow. So we just scrambled and booked flights and we were back in Toronto the next day. And then it gets worse because we were trying to fly back in. And so this is a while ago. It was my 30th birthday and they wouldn't let John fly. It was like out of a movie. They're like, they sent us to secondary. And because I was on an O1 and his was on,
you had your tickets, you're at the airport and they're not going to let him board the plane.
That's right. So we're at the airport. Now we're trying to go back into the US because we'd already come for 3 or 4 days. And then our lawyer advised us that we could come back. And we get there and they ship us into secondary. We're sitting there asking us all these questions. And he had a new job, but the visa was still processing. And I was on an O1. And so they said that he's my dependent on my O1 and he can't come in until he squares out all this stuff. And there was people on the phone, lawyer, like all these people calling and saying it's good, like doing all this stuff. They were no.
Were you married at that point?
Yes, we got married in 2007.
Okay.
So
So
he
that would
was my
make,
husband, and
yeah,
they
so that would
still
make him the
wouldn't.
dependent. Okay, that makes sense.
Right.
Man, but that's, well, the O1, I don't know much about the visas. I've known a few people. I guess I've known quite a few people actually, now that I think about it, but I've never really talked about it with that many people. But the O1 is the extraordinary abilities, for acting, musicians, and other
Yes.
kind of special areas. Does that not have a provision for, is that just because he was working here, or because it should have a provision for your spouse?
Well, it does, but he wasn't on my visa. He was on his own visa.
Oh, so it just wasn't set
And
up. I see.
and what happened is he was had a pending green card that was processing, and that's what the lawyer messed up on. So then
Ah,
that was why we had to leave. And then they're like, but now what are you on? It's like this influx thing, even though they were processing a new, but it was like the timing of it was that right now you're kind of nothing to us. So
right.
you're her dependent, but we're not going to let you in. And so John was like, they're not bending. You need to just fly because we've paid for the tickets
And you've got a life. I mean,
and you have a life, and I'll
yeah.
get back when I can. He came back like 2 days later. It was like pretty
So that's not too
quick. It was
bad, but
squared
still.
away. But in that moment, I literally felt like I was in a movie. Like he leaves and I go through security and I just start crying. I'm
Sounds like
like,
a movie.
right. I'm
It
like, my
really does.
husband
You could
can't
write it
come.
and
And it's my
people be like,
birthday. I know. So then I get back to New York and I call out my two friends and they live right down the street from me. And I'm like, it's my birthday. I'm talking about. Anyway, we went to our favorite local Mexican restaurant, sat on the patio and had some margaritas, and it was all good. And then John came back a couple of days later.
that's amazing. I mean, that's definitely, if you haven't done it already, that's definitely something to think about in terms of writing into a script, because
True.
it would make, depending on how you do it, if you want to expand it, and really dig in, I mean, it could be a little TV series,
Yeah.
because he, as a broadcaster, he's had an interesting life, and I'm sure you guys have had millions of other interesting things happen in New York.
Yeah.
But like, a Canadian couple moves to New York and gets kicked out and has a life, and has family, friends, whatever. I could see that being
Yeah.
a show. I could see that being an interesting, fun show.
Yeah, a hundred
Uh,
percent. We sort of talked about it before, and I don't know why I never really fleshed it out, but you raise a really good point. I mean,
Maybe
even
stick too close
now,
to it. Yeah.
yeah, maybe, but even now, like with Callie sort of wanting to be in the world now, there's like stuff there too. I don't know.
Do you have any reservations about letting her? I mean, because you still have control at this point in time. She's,
I
young
do.
enough.
I I'd like her to do something else. But, when she asked me a few years ago that she wanted to try it, I couldn't say no, try
Yeah.
it. And it was actually really good for her confidence, just going into the audition rooms and meeting people. And she
Oh,
worked
absolutely.
on some projects, a commercial and a TV show. And so, you know, but as she's getting older, I don't want it to feel like work, and she has to want to do it
Mm.
because you know how tough this business is. And so I sometimes if she gets like 6 pages, I'm like,
Do you really want to do this?
you really want to do this?
Yeah.
And she oh yes, but sometimes she'll grumble, but then she goes off and she learns them dead cold and she's good. So I'm kind of like, well, she did go and learn them, and it's not like I nagged her to do it. I keep being like, you don't have to do this. You don't want to. You don't have to. You can just do your guitar, your coding, or whatever. But at this point, she wants to, and
Yeah.
she's interested in it, and she's good. So we'll just let her continue it until she doesn't want to, or she does.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it just sometimes it feels like, why am I living this hell over again with another generation?
Yeah, I get that. I mean, I don't know if Ashley and I will have kids. I mean, we've talked about it, and we definitely kind of are on the idea that we're going to have at least one kid, but you don't actually have control over that stuff. I mean, I don't know if she wants me to tell her age. So she's of that age where you have to start, considering, once you're over 32, I think you have to
Yeah.
start considering, is this possible? They call
Mhm.
it a geriatric birth or something, I think, after 32 or 33 or something. Anyways, so who knows what will happen, but I don't know if I would stop them from being in the industry, in the entertainment industry, but I also
No.
don't know that I would introduce it as an option,
Yeah.
and if they
I
find
didn't.
it, yeah.
Yeah. She literally said to me one day, we were driving and she goes, I want to try acting. And it had actually started from my younger child who asked for it first.
Mm,
And then she did a full 180 and said, nope, I don't want anybody looking at me. I don't like that. Don't want to do it. And this was a few
wow.
years ago. And she
Yeah.
stuck to that. She wants to be a fashion designer and a
That's
singer, songwriter. And it is cool. And she's been sketching since she was really little.
Yeah.
But if they want to do it, you have to let them do it. It's like anything.
This is not to get too esoteric or anything, because I do get esoteric in some of these conversations, but I'm just kind of curious, fate or free will or both, or some variation of both, because the reason why I'm asking is because you've had some very interesting serendipitous moments where shit just worked against all odds. And now, talking about your kids and their interest in acting, it's like, I had a thought, I was like, well, she could be, a big movie star and we don't know it because, she hasn't gone through her pacing yet, which then would be,
well,
fate.
Yeah, I don't know which is right, but I will say this. She's growing up in a family where it feels normal. It doesn't feel weird. So John was always on TV.
Yeah.
We have pictures of her, like as a baby, we'll look, oh, it's daddy on the TV. Like being on TV is not weird for her.
Mm-hmm.
She even did like a robot segment with him when she was like 7 and went on his business show. And cool. Like they do the Santa Claus parade here. And for them, oh, my battery, I thought it was plugged in. Sorry. For them, it's just for her. Sorry. Quinn still does feel weird being on TV, but for Callie, because she's older and it's always been around her, like I've always been auditioning or doing a show or John's on show. She's like, okay, this is normal. For me, it wasn't. My mom was an interior designer and my dad was a sales guy at Canon and then went into corporate communications. And I remember when he went into corporate communications, because he had a great personality, they used him as the face and he had to do all the TV interviews. But I mean, he was very nervous and he would go through the media training, but it wasn't natural for him to go on TV and talk. Whereas Callie she already has that skill. Mm-hmm. Like she can already do it and not feel strange about it. And because she worked on that one project years ago and it was a big TV show, she went and all the cameras were, and she did the commercial. And to be honest with you, I was blown away. She got this Boston Pizza commercial and she just had to talk and talk. And we get to the set. This was her first like big thing. And the director's like, and she was booked because she was in the audition room, like 3 or 4 callbacks, like talking, being all animated. And the director's like, hi, she's like a mute. And I'm like, okay, this could go sideways fast.
Oh yeah.
I had no idea what to expect, but I was okay with it. I mean, she's my daughter and I'm going to support her
and
no matter what.
Yeah. You've been through it, so you're not going to freak out on her. And
no, if it doesn't work, no, I'm not going to be a stage mom. And if it doesn't work, I'm going to go, I'm sorry, I don't know what you want from me. She's not talking. So you're going to have to get it out, or you're the director.
She's an autonomous human being. Like, oh, go figure.
You handle her. But weirdly, when the camera started rolling and all these extras were walking by and she's talking to the dad, it was like a light switch. And she's like saying all these big words and they were all like, and I'm like, okay, there she goes. There she is. And I felt like in that moment, you are a performer.
Yeah. I mean, I think I don't know. I always come back. Last night, I was actually playing with something I was writing, and I always come back to Shakespeare's words: all the world's a stage, all the men and women are merely players.
It's one of my favorite.
Oh, it's such an amazing monologue. And to me, those words are truth. Like, I thought my parents were entrepreneurs and educators. My dad left education before I was born, and my mom left education when I was really young, but I was still old enough to know that she was, in the education world, teaching and whatnot. But they were entrepreneurs and business people, most of my childhood, really. And my dad is very much, likes to be the center of attention. And so I don't like, I looked at I wouldn't even, I didn't understand their business either. So to me, like, it just all seemed like performative, everything just seemed like some big play that was going on. And I look around, I still to this day, as an adult, I look around at the world and I'm thinking, like, what the hell is everyone doing? Like, where are they going? Like,
it's all a play. It's all a show.
It is.
It's all an act. And that's why that is one of the most profound. I mean, it really is all the world's a stage.
Yeah.
Like, because, and we can get down that whole rabbit hole or whatever, but for some reason I plugged this in and it's not charging. But anyways, well, that we're all wearing masks.
It's not a bad place.
Everyone wears masks, but you don't always mean to. It's just who you are, and you change with different people and what you're doing.
Well, there's certain, I don't even know, like the way I look at it now, I don't even look at it as masks anymore. It's more of just different sides of myself, different, so different things are going to shine through. And like a mask to me, like still has a connotation as like, okay, I am now this person.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that the truth is there really is much more of a slide or a rheostat, a spectrum. And I don't think mask is the right terminology.
No, I don't either. I think,
I think because like more of my humor is going to come out with some people, more of my technical, serious mathematical mind is going to come out with other people. Right. And it's not that like I don't have the humor there. It's just not going to be as strong. So it's like, those, maybe this is a good analogy, those big mixing boards, you see it like when, Dr. Dre is doing an album, whatever, and there's like a million buttons. Like, I think that's the human personality.
Yes.
It's a million different buttons and you slide this up, you bring this down, let's bring them all up, and they're going to just freak out and melt down for a minute. And then we're going to bring all the levels down and just bring the sad up, or, you know what I mean? Like
1,000%. And that's us only using whatever percentage of our brain that it is we use. Right. And that is so multifaceted. And I think that's why, I think the older we get, the more, maybe some people access it when they're younger, but for me, the more I feel comfortable showing more of those buttons at one certain time. Yeah. And it's unfortunate sometimes that people, always use one button, and like, there's way more to you. And I think also just in this social media world and how people are growing up, and I wonder about my girls and all of that, we need to still tap into all the parts of ourselves.
Well, there's been several landmark kind of psychological, this might be too long of a rabbit hole to go down, but
I'm just going to check my plug.
Yeah. Well,
sorry. Now, okay. No, now it's fine.
Working. There's a book out called Symphony of Selves. I'm actually, did it work?
I don't know what's going on. Just wait 1 sec. I plugged it in, but it's so, right?
I heard the plug go.
I know, but then it didn't. It's really weird. Oh, now it's actually staying. Okay.
All right.
Good.
There has been a big movement of late in psychological circles for like Symphony of Selves is one book. IFS, Integrated or Internal Family Systems, is another system that are basically saying, and I've also heard there's a bunch of other books lesser known that talk about how we have multiple selves, and there's a multiplicity of us, and we are not just one thing. And it makes sense,
Yeah.
I mean, we now know Ayurvedic medicine has been saying for thousands and thousands of years that, the gut, it has a lot to do with our
Yes.
choices, our happiness, and everything else. And we now know that that's a fact. Like, that's
Yeah.
an absolute
The
scientific
brain
fact.
gut connection,
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
So it's fascinating, like how many different things, which goes back to All the World's a Stage. If we're here playing a character, and and we're not really truly dialed in to all of our parts and all of our things, then we're going to have aspects come out that are triggered or puppeted by forces that we don't see and we don't like have access to because we're not paying attention. And like that's like, I think the biggest, and then tying that into, fear and dealing with fear and making choices and, building your instincts, and being able to make better decisions. It's
Yeah.
like, if we are compressed down to just one vision of ourselves that's on Instagram or something like that, or, based on the label of, oh, well, you're a white man, therefore, you think like this, and this, then it doesn't allow for all of the other spectrums, all of the other colors that go with me or with you or with anybody.
Yeah.
And if you don't know them personally, how do you play those as a character? Or how do you learn to connect with other people
Right. But
at large?
you also have to layer with what you're saying, because people are only seeing the tip of the iceberg, right? To
Yeah.
the point where you learn some things about my youth and my history today.
Mm-hmm.
You're not seeing where that person grew up, how they grew up,
Mm-hmm.
what made them who they are, what their external, sensory stuff that they had to deal with
Right.
was. So all of that changes this white man from this white man.
Yeah.
And we're and people, I mean, obviously easier said than done. Book by its cover, don't judge a book by its cover. But I wrote down Symphony of Selves. I'll check that out. It sounds fascinating.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I'm actually going to be talking to one of the authors. It's James Fadiman and Jordan Gruber. I hope I'm saying his name right. I don't have it in front of me. But I'm going to be speaking with Jordan later on another episode. But yeah, I mean, I think as, all the world's a stage and all the men and women, I think along that lines, part of the most amazing thing that acting can do for, for anyone, because I've seen so many people come out here and realize, oh, wow, this is not for me, but they still gain such a great asset from pursuing it for a while and taking classes for a while, because they learned who they were. They learned more about themselves. They learned how to listen to themselves in a way that all of a sudden they were not being as impulsive, because they now understood themselves better. So they were able to make better decisions. And
yeah. And I think it also teaches you how to listen better. Mm-hmm. And concentrate on the other person. But just what you were saying with all of that, it also made me think about not caring about what anyone thinks, which is very complicated because everyone always cares. But to get to a certain point where you care less, a lot less, is really enlightening and helpful to your well-being.
So this is so interesting, because I'm adamant that it absolutely does matter what other people think.
Yeah.
But you got to understand who the people are to be able to take that information and do something with it, because what other people think is really valuable information. Regardless of who they are, and regardless, they could be the most misogynistic, racist, homophobic, what you and I would dub a horrible person. But it's still valid input, like how you're coming off and what you're getting. And so it's really about data management in my mind than anything else. And so, because, and this is also this is my personal belief. I personally believe we're here, whatever, to learn. And this is really an educational process and an opportunity for us as energetic beings or as consciousness. I think this is just one incarnation of our consciousness. So this
Yeah.
gets into my
No,
personal feelings.
actually, it's really funny that you bring this up, because I don't know if this is where you're going to continue with this, but the other day, John said something very similar, that we are here to learn.
Yep.
And to pass along information.
Yep. 100%.
Yeah.
And
it makes sense.
And so if we're going to do that optimally, if we think about this and trying to be perfectionists that we are, and we're going to try to do that in the best possible way, then we need to learn how to learn better always. And we need to constantly be learning how to learn new things. And we need to be able to take in as much data as possible, because the more data you're able to take in, the more, if you are correctly, parsing that data, then you're going to have more metrics to measure your growth and your expansion, and be able to then more effectively, give it back and pass it on.
And I actually always say, and this is something that my dad said as well, and that I always say to my kids, knowledge is power. The more knowledge 100%. We can gather, the more power we get. And to your point, it doesn't matter where it comes from. And, also getting feedback, constructive criticism, all of these things are good things. But yes, taking in all the knowledge we can. I don't get why people don't. Like, for instance, this is a small sampling, but my daughter's going into grade 7, and all of the alternative schools and the other schools have Zoom meetings to talk about what their school's about. I went to every single Zoom meeting, because why wouldn't I?
Yeah,
I just want to know. Knowledge is power. Yeah, it was after dinner. I would go and I would get a feeling for it, because then, and she went so she can see where she wants to go, because otherwise, how do you know? G.I. Joe, knowing is half the battle.
You're closing your eyes, spinning around in circles, and then throwing a dart and hoping it hits where you want to go.
Right.
If you
and that goes into the research bucket too.
Yeah.
Right. Knowledge research. However, doctors don't look kindly on me when I do Google research when I go to a doctor's appointment. Yeah. I try not to bring it up anymore.
My father had some basic medical training because he was in the Peace Corps. He did, he worked as a phlebotomist. And big fancy word for taking blood, and an X-ray tech. So that was how he paid his way through.
You school. Said, wait, what did you say? I thought you said lobotomist.
Phlebotomist.
Oh, I was thinking of a lobotomy.
Yeah, that's your reaction was like, either she doesn't know the word or it didn't come out right.
That's really funny.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought he was doing I thought you were like lobotomist. I'm like, maybe that's a word for people that do lobotomies. Wow.
No. He definitely didn't do that. He took blood and gave shots and X-rays, and then he was in the Peace Corps. So he also wanted to be a doctor, but he didn't get into Stanford. I think he applied to like 1 or 2 medical schools, like the best medical schools. He didn't get in. He's like, well, I guess I'm not supposed to be a doctor. That was his thinking.
Yeah.
And so anytime I went to the doctors, my dad would either question or try to correct, because like he knew, because he had experience, but he studied and had enough knowledge to annoy the doctor.
Right.
Which was always fun.
I'll tell you what it is. I can be a self-diagnosed slight hypochondriac, and my brain goes to the darkest place before I can bring it back to the rational zone.
Sure.
And
you want to explore all the options.
I need to go to the darkest. Yes, dark, then rational, then I'm okay. But what I don't like about the doctor process is like they talk to you like you don't know anything, and they start at level 1, and I'm like, God, I'm way past this. And so
I don't understand. I've spent 3 hours getting to level 5.
I'm at level 6. Like, I don't want to go through, it's exhausting for me going through these really basic things until she gets to where I already came in the door at,
right?
Because I did all the and not that I'm always right. I'm not saying that, but you know what I'm saying.
If you were always right, you'd probably be a research scientist. So
right.
you would have one more job to add onto your resume.
That's right. Another thing to my crazy list of growing things.
Yeah, it's a funny thing. It's a funny thing, this whole thing called life. And, my take on it ultimately, and this is the reason why I'm doing the show, is that I don't know if people know how, or even are finding, there's so much content, there's so many, so much crap out there. Critical thinking is essential. And the people who want critical thinking and want to dive in and want more information, I don't know if they're easily finding it. And so my hope is that, like, this type of show, it had I listened to this 20 years ago, might have made it a little bit easier for me to understand and let go some of my dogma around my vision. And it's like, because each step of the way I was as an actor, it was like, well, okay, I now understand, to get a big movie, you've got to be either related to someone, or you had to have been around for a long time. You have to have this agent.
Yeah.
You have to have these credits. And it's like, all right, well, I'm hoping for that still, but what would it take to get on, TV or whatever? And so all of a sudden it went from, this is the vision that I have for myself, to, well, what's possible? Because I don't know, maybe I'm just completely delusional. What's possible?
Yeah.
And I think I had someone, a mentor or someone, to, like, walk me through options, or walk me through, this is what other people did.
Right.
Like, because I've spent so much time on IMDb. I've spent so much time researching people and trying to figure out how they did it and what they did.
You're trying to crack the code.
I'm trying to crack the code. And I don't think I spent enough time just, like, letting go and just, throwing myself at stuff.
Yeah.
Because, well, I've got the look. I've spent years studying. Everyone tells me I'm great. Casting directors will bring me back again and again and again, yet it's still not working. And, like, each time I would figure out one more thing of, okay, well, now why it's not working. So I ended up on a roller coaster of trying to find all the ways things don't work, instead of all the things that do work.
Right.
And
but I think
no one pointed that out to me. I was like,
right, that you're focusing on the negative things that don't work. Well, I mean, we've all been there, right? I think every actor can say they've spent time on IMDb wondering why someone got the role and they didn't. But, I
focusing
think
on what works is such a much better strategy.
It really is, focusing on what works and what's positive rather than focusing on the negative.
And try that. Well, okay, it didn't work for me. What else did someone do? Let me try that.
Right. But so at least you're iterating, right? Because sometimes I think the definition of insanity doing the same thing over and over again. So if you're iterating and learning new things, you're not doing the same thing over and over again. Because sometimes I'm like, oh, because I've been out the door. I've been like, 2 feet out the door, 1 foot out the door with this business several times. And I always come back to it because I love it. And then I get a job and I work and I think, nope, I don't want to leave. And the vicious cycle.
It's magic. It's like, oh my God.
That's right.
The greatest thing.
You're like, but if I could do this every day, if I booked the lead in the show, then, why would I walk away now as I'm getting closer. So, and again, it goes to the, Scray goes, don't quit. And everyone has their journey, and there's so many things you don't understand or don't know. And half of it is that luck factor or the railroad tracks. So you meet at the railroad tracks and you need to be ready. So if you're lucky railroad tracks like mine for that hosting gig met up and I was ready for it. I'm now ready for the show. Like I probably wasn't ready even 5 years ago. Maybe I would have learned along the way and got through it. But right now I'm like, good to go. So I think that all of these things need to be landing in the right spot when the right thing comes along, because it could be the wrong thing too.
But
and
that
then
also
that wrecks people's career too.
Oh yeah. But I mean, that also kind of goes back to the, fate of free will, because, if we're here to learn, then it also would make sense that there's a word that I learned. We're starting to get on the long side, so
I know probably, I'm gonna have to
wrap it sooner than later.
My other appointment got pushed, but my kids will be home soon, so I have to go.
Okay,
but
so I'll say this word and we'll talk about it for 2 seconds, and then we'll try to wrap up at that point. So my new word, I was looking for an equation that basically has infinite possibilities, but the same outcome no matter what. And the only word that came back to define that was idempotent. So IDEMPOTENT. So item, oh, now I'm forgetting the Latin for what it means.
Wait, how do you spell it? Not omnipotent, idempotent?
Idem, IDEM, potent, POTE. Now I can't spell.
NT, yeah.
So potent meaning plenty or numerous, and item meaning a specific. I think that's the origin. My brain is just fritzing out, but essentially, like an on-off switch is idempotent. So like a binary, so computer programming. So it was invented, the word came into existence in the 1800s, but nowadays it's only used by programmers, because a lot of programming has to be idempotent, because you have to be able to, no matter what the person does, get them to the same place at the end, So for instance, life is idempotent. You're born, no matter what you do, you die. That's idempotent. So like to some extent, like you get on a plane, it's headed to New York, take out the variables. You can jump up and down, you can fall in love, you can have a heart attack, you can give birth. A whole life can take place from LA to New York in that plane, in that 6-hour plane ride or whatever it is. But you're still going to end up in New York at the end of the trip if you started in LA. And so that's idempotent. And, to some extent, this is like, I didn't think this conversation would ever get here, but to some extent, it kind of sums up a lot of what we're talking about, from, your daughters and your art. It's like our self-expression, our need for self-expression, our need, for perfection. It's like, it doesn't matter how we do it. It's just because it's going to have the same outcome. No one's getting out of this alive. Not to be dark and morbid.
No, but it's true.
It's true. And it's like, so what can we do to enjoy it to the most and get the most out of it, and squeeze? I think there's a quote there somewhere from someone, squeeze the marrow out of the juice out of the lemon or something, and get every single drop. And I feel like that's kind of,
but that's why. But if you think like that, then you'll be less fearful, because you're going to die anyway. Yeah. And now I lost the other thing I was going to say, and it was really good.
It'll come back. I mean, there's like focusing on, I wouldn't.
I know what I was going to say.
Yeah.
And thinking like that should dissipate some of the fear.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, I wouldn't. Yeah. I mean, what I was going to say kind of fits that, because I focused on the negative of like, let me find one more way I can't be a successful working actor. Or like, I'm going to try to gain weight. I'm going to try, to shave my head, and let's see if anyone wants to bring me in now. No. I, you know, I overanalyze or perfectly analyze things, which has led me to creating this show, this thing. And
You just need to get out of your head and get out of your own way and think positively.
Yeah. And just have fun with it, because I'm kind of done. I'm kind of over, I'm like over it all. Like, it was fun to figure shit out. Like, I've figured out, I have enough. I mean, I've done so many jobs as you have, and it's like, I'm done. Like, I'm ready to just do one thing now. Like, and I'll talk to people about all the other things, but I just kind of want to do one thing. I want to do,
And I think that's good. I think focusing is key. Like for me, I used to do too many things at one time, and I would spread myself too thin. So, for years I was doing photography, and I'm not doing that anymore. I can't. So I just don't want to do 7 things okay. I want to do one thing really well. And then, so I like to see it as, okay, we have the acting and we're working when we work. And then the resin is like my job. And that's where I'll try to make some income, but it's still creative. And if I can just focus on those things, because I still have to, my kids and be a mom, and there's a lot. So when people ask me, do you still do photography? I usually say no. And I stopped doing commercials, I think like 2 or 3 years ago. I just don't have the headspace or the time for it. I want to just focus on TV and those auditions, especially with my daughter going out for commercials. It's too much. So I think that for me, like the mental health, as I can try to streamline and focus and do my goals I like to do a goals board at the top of each year, 2022, I'm like, okay, I've got my things. And now that I'm into NFTs, see, I'm starting again. These things start to trickle in, and now I'm doing this NFT, but it's because I'm a curious person.
Yeah. Yeah. But so that's interesting. So, I mean, so you do try then to narrow down and weed out things as you
now
go
I
then.
do, because before I think I was a little bit too, what's the word, abstract or sporadic, or just letting in too many
juggling
things.
too many balls. Juggling too much. I think that makes sense. Like
because it would get to a point. No, go ahead.
Well, I always had a million projects going, and like the one that got the most attention was the one that I thought was maybe the most viable. And I don't know that that's a good strategy. Like, I don't think most viable, like, unless all you care about is money and all you care about is viability, then okay, there's merit there. But if you want to do something that has value to you and is lasting, then I do think you have to, have a vision and mine that vision for, all it's worth, and then execute that, and then
focus on that and take the steps towards that certain goal. Because to your point, I took a full-time writing job in 2019, 2020. I was working from home, but it was full-time writing for a company called Chapters. And I was writing these like chat fiction with like little avatars, romantic stories. But when an audition would come through, I was stressed out because I didn't have time for it. And it was like at the bottom of the list. And I was doing a disservice to myself, because what was more important to me, writing these romantic stories or wanting to get on that show? Well, it was the show, but I wasn't putting in the effort or the time or that I needed to, because I was so distracted with this other job because it was viable. And by the way, I didn't like the job. It wasn't what I thought it was going to be. And I didn't like the people I was working with. So I was just in a really unhappy spot. And then the pandemic hit, and then my kids were home, and I was like, I cannot do all of this anymore. So I walked away. I walked away from the more viable job. And I'm lucky that John has a viable job. And I know some people are in other situations, but I also wanted to be there for them, because at that point there was no support. I was homeschooling them until the schools got things up and running. And then I was able to focus on my auditions again. But then I'd get bored in between, which is when I found the resin. It's all complicated.
That's funny. But I mean, it also seems like you have to, there's a certain amount of, okay, it's doing its thing. Like the acting, like we both of us have been acting, for decades at this point in time. There's nothing we really have to do on a day-to-day basis that's going to make that big of a difference for any audition that's going to come through.
Right.
Like maybe there's a random job out there that would cause us to have to really do some serious work. But most of it's muscle memory and emotional memory. It's like, it's right at our fingertips. Like,
and the more you do it, the more you do it, the more you can just,
so it's on autopilot. Don't forget to leave a comment or a review. I'd love to hear your thoughts. New episodes every Tuesday. And for short clips from each episode, check out YouTube. Thank you. And don't forget, your life story is yours to write and rewrite as many times as you want.